In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, AI takes over journalism and gets into the cryptid game. A homeowner insists his house was set on fire by a meteor and is stunned by the astronomical amount of insurance paperwork. A man gets shot by his friends while hunting Sasquatch. The only thing missing from the cover-up? Clown shoes. For our main topic, we investigate the Varginha UFO case out of Brazil, including the suspected capture of aliens, as well as our struggle to identify one of the most effective tools in animal control's arsenal. And they use nets to capture it, as well as the circle rope stick device.
I wish I knew what that was called. The rope on a pole. I don't know.
Rope on a pole. Very descriptive.
Rope on a stick.
I think everybody knows what you're talking about. And if they don't,
use your imagination.
Use your imagination.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hall.
And I'm Jimmy Cole.
In tonight's episode, we are going to be visiting Varginha, Brazil, where in 1996, a UFO allegedly crashed, and a couple of ETs were scurrying about the city and were finally apprehended by the military after being seen by several witnesses. Is this an unbelievable case of an extraterrestrial encounter? Before we get into that, Jimmy, what has been going on this week?
Oh my gosh, there's just so much going on. There's AIs getting into the same stuff that you and I are into, cryptids and...
Another AI story, I see.
I know.
You must be worried about the singularity.
I'm a little worried about it, but not so much anymore because me and the AIs share the same things, same likes. So I think we're going to get along just fine. Probably. So MSN, that's the Microsoft News Network, fired its human journalist and replaced them with AI that started publishing fake news. Well, maybe not fake, but fake news about mermaids and Bigfoot. So
nice.
Yeah. Fired its journalist, and now they just have a skeleton crew that sort of reviews what the AI is producing and pushes it out to the public. And that appears to be a bit of a problem for the journalist.
I've heard about this, not this specific story, but I've heard about this for quite a while now, where there is software out there that you can feed in a few facts and it will write the story. Also in the world of art, you can describe, you might say, a young woman standing next to a spaceship on an alien world, and the AI will draw the drawing, or actually a painting. I mean, it'll create this beautiful artwork just by describing it. Seeing more and more of that. I mean, I think it's just another case of the AI just going to replace human beings.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's what's coming down the road, man. Just be ready for it.
One thing I find interesting about this revolution, these are the type of jobs that I would say 20 years ago, when we saw a lot of robotics or automation entering manufacturing, taking auto workers' jobs, let's say. That was always the robots are taking everyone's job. They could get by with a lot less workers. And we see that all across manufacturing. And then we started seeing warehousing jobs. We have robots. I mean, the most up-to-date warehouses out there don't have human beings pulling orders. I mean, I was in a Volvo plant about a year ago, and when they need a part, they literally just program it in, and all this machinery will pull it down, bring it down to where it needs to be. Whereas, a few years ago, a human being would have been on an order picker and going up on the shelf, or we're stocking it. All those years ago, everyone was seeing these blue-collar jobs being taken, let's say, by robots. And now, we're starting to see white-collar jobs being taken by robots or AI, right? I mean, just think about it. I don't think anyone could have imagined that 25 years ago, that a computer could write a news article or do these paintings. It's just, the paintings to me are just unbelievable.
That's exactly right, where you have these cases 20, 30, 50 years ago, where you're automating out singular repetitive tasks. And now today you're taking creative tasks Task that would require a strong grasp of the English language to produce a full paragraph or set of paragraphs that come out with a cumulative story that's clear and concise with correct grammar. You would have never thought that a robot would be able to do that, or an AI. And now, here we have it. They're doing it. And like you said, the artwork, I mean, why do you need an artist anymore if you can just type in what the scene you want and out pops the thing? You say, I want it in the style of Van Gogh, and I want it to be a woman standing next to a spaceship with a starry background. Bam, there you go.
There was years ago a Twilight Zone episode from the 50s or early 60s. And I just love, when you have futurists that can maybe foresee some of these kind of things. Mm-hmm. Because there was this Twilight Zone episode years and years ago where the CEO, or I guess the president of a company, kept replacing people with robots throughout the episode. And then at the end of the episode, there's Robbie the robot.
Replaces the CEO.
Yeah, he replaces the CEO at the end of the episode, because he's like swinging his watch chain. He used to, had a watch in a vest, like a pocket watch, and he would swing it. That was what that president did. And then there's Robbie the robot swinging his watch chain, just like he did. So
you have
pretty
been
cool.
Replaced.
Yeah. All right.
What do you got? Anything good?
So this story is a few weeks old. This is reported by NPR on November 15th, and it was reported earlier on a couple other places, but this one had better graphics, so I went to this one. I posted this on Facebook. It had more photographs. Anyway, this California man says that a meteor, he believes, set fire to his home. So the house, which sits on a cattle ranch in Nevada County, California, about 60 miles from Sacramento, was destroyed. Its owner, Dustin Presida, was left rattled by the seemingly freakish accident. Local eyewitnesses took to the internet, spreading images and video of a bright yellowish light in the sky careening toward Earth. Neighbors told arriving firefighters that they had heard a thunderous crash at about the same time as the blaze is believed to have begun. Scientists who track meteorites are skeptical that this tragedy was caused by a falling rock from outer space. In fact, Peter Jenkinsons, a meteor astronomer with the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, told NPR that by the time a meteorite would have hit Earth, there was probably not much left of the falling rock, likely a rogue piece of the southern Taurid meteor shower that is famous for producing the brightest fireballs during the month of October. He said nothing showed up on the Doppler weather radar. There's some other things they get into it. So scientists are skeptical that this happened. But after this was reported and the witnesses, there were actually some dash cam video of, a meteor coming down and looks like it hits the sky. So who knows? And there have been meteors. There was a woman actually hit by a meteor back in the 50s, I think. So it's possible.
Yeah, talk about unbelievably bad luck.
Yeah, they said it was like 1 in a trillion chance to even be hit, maybe.
Jeez.
Do you have any other news?
Yeah, I have one. I don't know how much we'll go into. There's not a lot there, but I just love the headline, which is Man Shot, Others Arrested After Alleged Bigfoot Hunt Gets Hairy.
Is that pun intended? No doubt.
The group told the police that their friend was accidentally shot as they searched the woods for the legendary Bigfoot. However, officers said they thought the story of the hunt for Sasquatch sounded more like a fishtail. The story was that 2 men were out hunting in the woods of Catoosa, and one man got scared and shot his buddy in the back. The men were on the hunt for Sasquatch. A 911 call came in from a gas station near I-44 and 161 2nd Street.
Wasn't that I think I read about this. Wasn't that Dick Cheney?
Well, he's always packed and loaded, and he's skittish. He's skittish. He'll shoot at anything that moves. Deputies arrived. They took the wounded man to the hospital and surgery, and then when they started questioning the folks, it became pretty clear that something weird was going on, as one of them had thrown the gun that was used to shoot the man in a nearby pond. And anyone that starts out with a story that they're on the hunt for Sasquatch sets off alarm bells, Roger County Sheriff Scott Walton said. The man got spooked and shot the second man while the fourth person helped get rid of the gun in a nearby lake. And it was the remarks for going in the woods or whatever at night and looking for varmints that made them go, what? It doesn't line up. It looks like the man's wife, Lacey Pendia, is facing charges for obstructing an officer, and James Perry is being held for destroying evidence. The Tulsa County Sheriff's dive team found the gun, and they said they believe it was used, a 9mm handgun. In a situation where probably no one would have went to jail if they just would have told the truth at the first place, we ended up booking 3 of them into custody, and one's in the hospital.
Well, that's the dude that got shot. What did he do?
Well, he's just in the hospital. He didn't get booked. But Sheriff Walton also said that if you plan to hunt for Bigfoot, check with your local game warden to make sure you have the proper licensing before you go into the woods.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's move on to tonight's main topic. Before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Look for us on Instagram and Facebook, where we post many of the stories that we cover on the show. Go to our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. There you can find the web store, and especially this time of year, you can find t-shirts and other gifts to maybe give that special someone in your life a little bit of sponge, or buy something for yourself. Why not? Also on our webpage, there's ways to support the show. One is buy me a coffee for a one-time donation, or if you'd like to support us on Patreon, just follow the links there or go to patreon.com/cosmicsponge. And if you do so, you'll gain access for another show that we do called Weird Wonders, which we produce exclusively for our Patreon supporters. All right, well, let's move on to the show. Jimmy, I am quite certain that you have us a nice write-up before we get started on the Varginha.
Yeah, took a little legwork, but I got there.
Yeah.
2 teenage boys confidently marched into the dense Brazilian jungle carrying an unloaded rifle and a self-made sign that read Darwin at work. Darwin was misspelled. It wasn't long before the boys found themselves at the base of a UFO from which small, hairy aliens emerged and attacked them. Leveraging the 23% of their genes attributed to Neanderthals raging through their bodies, the boys were able to use the gun as a club, beat back the aliens, and retreat to safety. It was 1957, and João Martins pulled the paper detailing the account from the typewriter and placed it on a stack headed to the printer for the first installment of Flying Saucers' Terrible Mission. The case he had just written up was a famous one, which had occurred in 1954. In preparation for future stories, João included a request to his readers for submissions detailing their own out-of-this-world encounters. Enter Villas-Boas, a 23-year-old farmer, which was abducted the day after he had read João's request. While the timing was suspect, João knew a good story when he heard one and paid to have the farmer travel to Rio de Janeiro, where he had him examined by Dr. Olavo Fontes, and then grilled him on the details of his story. The story included the following: an abduction by small blue-eyed animal-grunting aliens wearing gray coveralls and helmets, blood work taken from his chin, of all places, imprisonment in a gas-filled room which made him nauseous, sex with a beautiful blonde sporting cat-like blue eyes, and finally, the sexual encounter resulted in an alien pregnancy where the child would be raised off-planet by a single mom and her 7 animal-grunting dwarves. While Villas did have symptoms consistent with radiation poisoning, the reporter and the doctor did not believe him and decided not to print his story. It was just a bit much. Fast forward 5 years later to 1962, Walter Buehler of the Brazilian ufology group SBEDV and an avid follower of George Adamski learned about Villas and tracked him down and ended up printing his story locally. The story was later reprinted in English in 1965 by the international journal Flying Saucer Review, gaining significant traction worldwide. Despite the story, Villas became a successful lawyer, and because of his story, the Brazilian state of Minas Gerais became a magnet for UFO enthusiasts. Since 1957, Brazil has had many UFO sightings, with tonight's case hailing from the home state of Villas-Boas himself, and one of the greatest cases of all time. I'm of course talking about the Varginha UFO Incident of 1996. So fire up your hit single Wonderwall by Oasis in your Nintendo 64 or watch the 1996 hit movie Independence Day to get into the mood as we head back to 1996 to look at the extraordinary case from the great nation of Brazil. Steve?
All right, man. So, yeah, this bizarre UFO case is considered Brazil's Roswell. I don't know where to begin with this. I don't know if we should begin with the timeline as it exists in ufology lore, or should we begin with the true timeline of whenever events had been revealed to the world?
I think we start with the three girls. And because that's what landed this into the international media, and that's what brought attention to the story. And then we can start the timeline from there chronologically. Just go back in time and say, this is what happened with the girls. And then let's see where that fits in the overall timeline.
Okay. There's a show in Brazil that's a weekly television show, been around since 1973. They broadcast a range of topics from politics to sports to UFOs, psychics, all kinds of things like that, and it's called Fantástico. They revealed on their show a creature was first sighted by three women ranging from 14 to 22 years old, sisters Liliane and Valkyria Fatima Silva, and their friend Katia Andrade Xavier. During an intense rainstorm and strong winds, they allegedly saw a creature in the afternoon of January 20th, 1996. They said it was a biped of about 1.6 meters, or 5 feet for Americans, with a large head and very thin body, with V-shaped feet, brown skin, and large red eyes. It seemed to be wobbly or unsteady, and the girls assumed it was injured or sick. The Silva sisters said that they fled and told their mother that they had seen the devil. The woman did not believe them until she went back to the area where they had allegedly seen this creature and smelled a strong ammonia-like odor and found nothing but footprints and a dog sniffing the place. You know how suspicious that can be.
Oh, yeah. Dogs sniff stuff that are only weird.
After the Silvas related their tale to family and friends, rumors began to spread throughout the city regarding UFO sightings and alien creatures being abducted by military forces. 2 days later, another creature was allegedly found lying along the road, and 3 military trucks were supposedly sent to retrieve it. A similar sighting was reported at the local zoo by its janitor. In the following months, 3 animals mysteriously died. Ufologist Roger Lear wrote a book called UFO Crash in Brazil that included interviews from people who claimed 2 creatures were taken to a clinic before being removed by military personnel. So that's where this all began, was the sighting by the 3 girls.
In the news media, right?
And the news media. I believe that it was revealed on this show, Fantástico.
Yeah. And that's a pretty popular show down in Brazil. So, I mean, if it's 1996 and you have a television, you're probably watching it.
Let's go back to the ufologist timeline. And recently, one reason Jimmy and I decided to cover this, as we've stated many times on this podcast, Jimmy and I are fans of James Fox, who makes UFO documentaries. He made one called The Phenomenon that we refer to quite often. I believe was released in 2020, I think.
That sounds right.
He just released a new one called Moment of Contact. He and his team, along with local UFO investigators, look into this case. And it seemed pretty extraordinary, so we decided to do a little research of our own. We're not going to try and refer to the movie too much, but there was a couple of interviews there we might talk about. But we did essentially our own research to find out what we could about this case. So it begins with the 3 girls. But once UFO investigators got into this story, the 3 girls said they spotted this alien. They had an artist draw the alien squatting next to a wall. Then 2 witnesses came forward after this show aired. A man and wife who owned a farm reported seeing a UFO. The husband said it was the size of a school minibus. and was trailing smoke as it flew over their farm very low. Said it looked kind of like a submarine in the air because it kind of floated along.
Yeah, so her name was Miss Orlina Augusta de Freitas, and she was in her farmhouse and all of a sudden heard the cattle going crazy. So then she steps outside and she looks up in the sky, and what does she see? She sees something that's about the size of a minibus. It's cylindrical in shape, like a cigar-shaped white object in the sky. And it has a tear along its backside, and it's spewing out this white foam, or white gas, rather. Her husband, Eurico Rodriguez de Freitas, was sleeping. She woke him up and brought him out, and he was like, man, I'm trying to sleep. And he comes out and says, holy crap, what the hell is that? And he's looking up at the sky, and they see this minibus type thing, and it's flown through the sky, and they watch it for 40 minutes as it's going over their property. They run a farm. It goes over their property towards a highway. And that's where the story gets picked up by another witness.
After this story had been out for a while, the UFO investigators got involved and started looking for other witnesses. A UFO researcher, Claudia Ercova, interviewed Mr. Carlos de Souza in 1996. I'm not sure how long it had been from the original report from the three girls, which kind of broke this story, that he came forward, or this UFO investigator found him. But the only interview he gave up until recently at the James Fox interview was to Kova, the UFO researcher, back in 1996. And he witnessed the UFO crashing into a field.
When did that happen? Because my date, I have two dates for that. One date is on January 13th of 1996. And the other one is the early morning hours of January 20th, 1996.
I don't have a date for it.
A lot of the reports I read, it looks like the timeline is, now I don't know whether it was January 13th or January 20th, but the farmers, the Freitas family, husband and wife, observed it at 2 o'clock in the morning, or 1 o'clock in the morning, and then Carlos de Souza observed it at 2 o'clock a.m. So those are the two dates and times I have, is that it happened at the same time, and the highway that he was traveling on, because he was meeting up with some friends, he was from Sao Paulo, and he was meeting and driving down to meet up with some friends to do some ultralight flying. And he observed this come over the highway, do a 360 turn, and go back, and he saw it drop in altitude as if it were going to crash. Thinking that someone might be in trouble, he takes a side road, follows it up, so he tracks down where it crashes, and he follows it up to that point. And that's at 2 o'clock a.m. I don't think the farmers ever heard it crash. They did see it go past their property over the course of 40 minutes. So that's pretty slow traveling, right?
That would be extremely slow, right? Souza leaves the highway, follows it down some secondary roads. Finally, the craft crashes. D'Souza gets out of his car, goes over to examine some of the wreckage. Shortly after that, the military arrive and run him off. Now, he briefly, he didn't describe the wreckage. I do want to refer to this one piece in the movie, Moment of Contact. James Fox explains it, even though the witness is sitting right there. He says that it's real light and flexible, and I mean, it sounded just like the Roswell wreckage, right? You know, where you could bend it and everything, then it goes back to its shape, but it's super light. Now, the witness didn't actually say that in the movie.
The witness says that, I think, though, in his first interview his only other interview back in 1996, he mentioned picking up a piece of the material, scrunching it up, and letting it go, and it reformed to its original shape. I think that came from the original 1996. And, follows very closely the Roswell claim that there was flexible material found there.
So at this point, he is run off of the farm, and that's the last we know of the flying saucer or the debris. Now, did he mention the odor? Was there a strong odor there? I believe he did.
He did. He mentioned an ammonia-like odor.
Right. And it was a very strong, acrid ammonia. And come to think of it, he said it smelled like rotten eggs.
Correct.
Which makes you think of sulfur.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was thinking about this. When you hear someone give you a report and say something has a really strong rotten egg smell or the really strong ammonia smell, I mean, what do you usually think about?
I immediately think about like gas, and they treat it with that chemical to make it smell like rotten eggs. So you can
Natural gas.
Natural gas, right? That's the first thing I think of. The second thing I think of is Beelzebub, the Satan, the Lord of Darkness, the guy down below. Yeah.
Now, the thing I think about is we often get reports that Bigfoot has this strong smell.
That's because he doesn't have toilet paper. He doesn't wipe.
I don't know what the deal is, but I mean, you hear that time and time again. So I'm thinking, is there a connection here? We got Bigfoot. Maybe the aliens were taking Bigfoot around. We've had those stories before. Bigfoot just
could be
beaming down or hopping out of a spaceship. The aliens had some Bigfoots. And the Bigfoots got away on foot because they could blend into the surroundings better than the aliens, who later got captured. What do you think?
I think you might have something there other than their size. They're a little tall, and all the creatures here are short.
Well, I'm saying nobody spotted the Bigfoot. They just smelled it.
Oh, maybe. I
don't know.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
Could be. Poop does stick to fur. Well, Carlos de Souza's story doesn't stop there, right? Because he leaves, and then he stops at a gas station down the road, and he's approached by two gentlemen who are dressed like, I suppose, men in black.
Men in black, yeah.
Brazilian men in black, so they have a little flair. And they tell him, you don't want to talk about this, forget it ever happened. And he does. He doesn't talk about this
for 26 years.
26 years until James Fox comes back on the scene.
Yeah, he was very emotional, de Souza, in the movie whenever he finally found the field where the crash was. It took him a little while to find it because it had been a very long time since he had been there, obviously.
Yeah,
but once he found it and started thinking about it, you could tell he got pretty emotional, got a little teary-eyed and stuff there.
Yeah, it's very compelling that something happened to him back in 1996, that he actually did actually take a toke or two and see something. And maybe that was laced. I don't know. Or maybe something actually did crash there. You know what? I'm actually inclined that something did happen there, that there was a crash, that something did happen.
And then the military presence, right? Because then we end up with this military presence in town, in Varginha.
So that leaves us, from Carla de Souza, we have now a timeline. January 13th, NORAD notifies Sindacta that there is some kind of activity going on over their airspace. And again on January 20th, a couple of days before January 20th, actually. And then it is on January 20th that we have this crash occur, or maybe January 13th, hard to say.
I couldn't find a satisfactory answer for this in my research. Where does this information come from that NORAD, right here in the United States, that monitors the skies, reaches out to the Brazilian government and says, we have noticed unusual activity in your skies? Where does that come from? I mean, did that come from a UFO book? Is there someone from NORAD that said that? Is there a public record of this?
I think it comes from researcher Ubrahero Franco Rodriguez. And I know I slaughtered his first name, and I apologize for that, but my Portuguese is rusty. So he's a noted UFO researcher, and I think maybe he requisitioned the communications between the air controllers in Brazil and the information they'd received. Something was going on, apparently.
And allegedly, they not only reached out to the military, but also their civilian air traffic control.
Right. And you know, this made me think that perhaps because the U.S. might be interested in something that was going to come down in Brazil, it made me think that perhaps it might have something to do with satellites or some kind of space program. So I went and looked, and I could not find anything. And they list everything that comes down in 1996. Mm-hmm. They do that for every year, with the exception of they do not record any kind of down security satellites by any international government. They don't.
Okay.
So it is possible that there was a satellite that was a classified satellite belonging to Russia. I forget the name of it.
Or even the United States.
Or the United States, that they wanted to make sure that they captured and that began in other people's hands.
Okay. Yeah, that's possible. Okay. Well, NORAD reaches out to the Brazilian government, says we've noticed some unusual activity on both January 13th and January 20th. We have the sighting on the ranch that goes on for 40 minutes of the two farmers.
Right.
That says this thing's obviously in distress. Then we have D'Souza, who sees the craft, follows it off the highway to some secondary roads, and actually witnesses this craft crash, notices the strange smells, all that, and then the military shows up, runs him off, has an encounter with the men in black down the road somewhere.
Right. And that is at Farm Maiolini, where he observes the crashed craft.
Then witnesses start discussing this military presence in the town, as if they're looking for something.
Right. The very next thing I see in my timeline is that at 7:30, people within the city of Varginha. I never drink wine.
I drink it in Virginia.
I drink my wine in Virginia. Listen to the wolves. So the 6 men. So there are 6 men from the fire department which respond to these calls, and they respond by 8:30 a.m. And they start searching for a beast, as it's being described by the citizen, seen by some locals, primarily on the basis of construction in the neighborhood named Jardim Andare. And this is the same location where the girls later in the day will see what they describe as this alien. The creature is spotted moving slowly toward eucalyptus plantation belonging to Mr. Joseph Nomez after the railway line in a large meadow at the back of Jardim Andare.
One thing to point out is in Brazil, or at least in Virginia, the fire department also acts as animal control. So here we might call the Humane Society or animal control. There, if there's a stray animal, beast, or whatever, they call the fire department, and they're equipped to deal with it. They have the tools on hand, nets, and what's those poles with the circle of rope in it where you can keep...
Oh, that's the circle of rope pole.
Yeah, anyway, where they can loop it and keep the animal at bay. And so, yeah, it was natural that the fire department would have been called after these reports of some beast running around town.
Yeah, and the other thing about the fire department down there that I found interesting and very useful to understand maybe the military involvement in all of this is that the fire department is part of the military in Brazil. It is an arm of the military, as well as the military police is like their own division, like a Navy or a Marines. They have this division called the military police, which also factors into the story a little later. A military commander is in charge of the fire department there. So the fire department gets called, they go out and they start looking. And they're like, what's going on here? What are we seeing? And they go down and capture what appears to be some kind of creature. And they use nets to capture it, as well as the circle rope stick device.
I wish I knew what that was called. The rope on a pole. I don't know.
Rope on a pole. Very descriptive.
Rope on a stick.
I think everybody knows what you're talking about. And if they don't,
use your imagination.
Use your imagination. Join a group on Darwinism. The creature is placed in a box and covered with cloth and canvas and then taken to a nearby hospital, I believe.
Now, does the fire department capture this alien before or after?
This is at 10:30 a.m.
The 3 girls have theirs.
Right. The girls' event occurs at 3:30 p.m., and this is in the morning at 10:30 a.m.
Oh, okay. So the fire department captures the first one. They take it to the local hospital. Witnesses claim that the entire wing of a hospital, patients were wheeled out. They couldn't serve their patients the way they needed to. Physicians have testified that something was going on there. Other personnel at the hospital have said that something strange was going on there. And then we go to the sighting by the 3 girls who say they see this alien. Now, also around this time, a storm comes in and high winds and heavy rain at the same time that they have this sighting. The mother goes back up there and finds some tracks and notices the strange odor. So about 3 hours later, two military police officers, Eddie Lopez and Marco Cherez, were patrolling the town very close to where the girls had their encounter. The alien runs across the road. Marco jumps out of the car, grabs the creature with his bare hands, and restrains it and puts this creature into the car. And they proceed to the hospital. And once again, Marco Cherez carries the creature in an arm load without any kind of gloves or any kind of protection. And strangely, a few weeks later, on February 10th, Marco Cherez develops an infection and he dies. And many people attribute it to toxins or a disease or something that he got off of that alien, because other witnesses said that the aliens were oily and had some kind of fluid on them, and that this rubbed off on him. Now, Marco Cherez's sister believes that he died as a result of handling this alien. However, she says he never admitted to her or never told her that that's what had happened. It said something big had happened, or something big will come out of this, I think, something like that. But he never once told her, hey, I handled an alien, that's why I'm sick. In the movie, they do interview an attending physician who believes that aliens were in town when that happened, and he said that Marco had died of unknown causes. Marco's sister, she claims that he was buried very quickly after his death and that an unknown substance was in his blood.
Yeah, it's like 8% of some kind of unknown toxin.
From here, the aliens they're in the clinic, the hospital, being examined. The military's there. A couple of witnesses said that they saw one of the aliens, at least, in a wooden box and its feet sticking up and was V-shaped. From there, the aliens are taken out of the hospital and to a nearby military base. There's even some reports that America got involved and negotiated with the Brazilian government to retrieve these bodies. I don't know about the debris, but to retrieve the aliens and take them back to the United States for study. So we have a pretty crazy story here. We have a UFO crash, aliens running amok in Varginha, multiple sightings. A military officer grabs one of them that resulted in his death just a few weeks later from some unknown substance or disease. What do you think of this?
Well, I had to break it down and really start looking at it in more detail. And I have several different thoughts about it, starting at the very beginning. I found an interview with a lawyer who lived just outside of Varginha. She claims that she heard a crash around 2 o'clock in the morning, which aligns with the timeline with D'Souza and with the Freitas family, that a crash occurred. And she called 911, attempting to get a hold of the fire station, and wasn't able to get through, but said that the fire station was already there, like with minutes later. So she assumed someone else had already called them, and they were on scene. It was about 1 kilometer from where she lived, so she couldn't see any details, but she can confirm that something exploded about 1 kilometer from her house, and she could see the flames, and she could see the fire trucks approaching the location. And I presume it's the same location that D'Souza mentions at that farm. So that event, I believe, occurred, and that would have been in the early hours of either the 20th or the 13th. I was not able to determine which of those dates was accurate. It was either the week before or it was the night of the event. Either way, that event, I think, occurred. It's just what the timeline is of it. So then the next thing we have is the interaction of the fire department with an alien in the morning of January 20th. That too seems to be likely that something occurred, but when you see the interview with the commander of the firehouse at the time, he was not on duty that day. And it's a little suspicious because when they asked to interview the firemen involved who were still there, when they asked to interview those folks, he said they were off duty that day. so weren't available for an interview. A little suspicious because that's 7 guys that weren't there. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Either way, there was no follow-up. There was no interviewing those men directly on the record. Off the record, there's claims that they were interviewed and that they did claim that they captured an alien. But
right,
that's off the record.
And the same thing with the military. The official line from the military is nothing happened.
Right.
Right. And of course, that's what we've come to believe. Military denies it. Everyone's threatened not to talk, all of those things. In fact, the military, and this again was somewhat like Roswell for us in the United States. In Brazil, this became a very big story, and it was believed that the government was covering it up. So they chose to investigate this incident and publish a report. I have some of the details of the report. I had to get this thing translated using Google Translate from Portuguese into English, but let's see. Some of it it wouldn't translate like some of the stuff. So I don't know, but I do have a pretty good summary here.
Now, is this the full 357-page report, or is it just a summary? Because when I went looking for it, it appears that there was a report produced by the military. It's 357 pages, but it was never released to the public. Just a summary was provided to the media, and it was very sparse in what it detailed.
Some of the details are in here because they refer to it and highlight it, but the style of how it's shown on Google on the web page that I'm looking at will not translate. So I can't quote directly from the document, but I do have a pretty good summary here.
That's convenient.
that points out what. That's
convenient.
Well, there's a lot of things convenient in UFO.
Google's in on it.
Research, yeah.
We can't translate those words from Portuguese to English because UFOs.
Yeah, it's top secret.
It's top secret.
So let's see here. Yeah, it says here the Brazilian Army, the military police would have captured the aliens on January 20th, 1996, 2 creatures from another planet, and taken them for analysis in hospitals and these institutions, according to ufologists, withheld since then the disclosure of the facts. Said they had access to only 2 documents produced by the government to investigate the occurrences. And there's been a lot of accusations made against military personnel, as usually happens in these cases. On page 334 of the material in the official account told by the military, after 7 months of investigation, the military had this to say. They said the girls actually saw a man popularly known in the area as Mondinho. He has some type of mental disorder and is known in the area to crouch down and look at things like little stones and rocks or cigarette butts and just closely examine things. They provide a picture of this individual, and he is very skinny. Honestly, I could see in the middle of a rainstorm or a thunderstorm and wind and everything that if the girls come around the corner and they saw this guy crouching there and acting a little weird and a little strange, where their imaginations may have run away with him. I mean, I can see it. I don't know. What do you think? Have you seen the photograph?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. He has a diaper on, which was
that's right.
his go-to get-up for the day. He was mentally and physically disabled. He was considered a dwarf in some of the writings, I think. But looking at him here, it doesn't look like he'd be a dwarf.
I just think he looks just like a small person, but not so much a
dwarf,
little person.
Yeah, dwarfism comes into the story quite a bit for some reason. But he is very skinny, and his head seems a little oversized for his really skinny body. And he's hunched over here in the exact same position that an artist rendition provided based on descriptions by the girls. It's almost the identical pose, and maybe that was intentional. So, yeah, I'm with you. This could be the guy, other than the fact that he doesn't appear to have 3 bumps on his head, and his eyes aren't 3 times the size as a normal person's, and they're not red.
Right.
But remember, this is also 1996, the same year that the Chupacabra comes on the scene and is incredibly rampant in their media. that year. So already we have this chupacabra.
So what are we doing here? We doing aliens or chupacabra?
I don't know. I just saw a lot of references to chupacabra when I was doing this story. And even the interviewed fire chief laughingly brought up chupacabra during his interview when they were talking to him. So,
yeah, maybe. And of course, some people consider chupacabra an alien pet. They're like, hey, it's just like a dog to us, right? That's what I've heard.
Yeah, but it's
some
a really smart dog.
Theorize.
That eats chickens.
Or something.
And goats.
He sucks their blood or something.
Yeah, eats goats.
Anyway, so that's their theory.
Right.
That's the military's theory on what they believe the girls saw. Also, the presence of the military. I found this to be so mundane. They said everything was nothing more than a mere work routine when Army trucks left the barracks for normal maintenance work in the workshop. Responsible for the maintenance and transportation company, the military unit that would be in charge of capturing and transporting the ETs, a Sergeant DeSantos, had to explain himself at the IPM, which I guess is the inquiry. He reported that the Army vehicles were on the streets because they were still under warranty, and they were taken to the particular dealership that was in Varginha to have their maintenance work done. And he was even able to provide an invoice dated on January 29th, 1996, that was attached to the file. Indicates that the trucks were there for balancing and alignment services.
Yeah, you don't get more mundane than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we were in town. We took our trucks down to get the front end of the line, right? During the investigation, 23 military personnel were interrogated. Damn it, I went back to Portuguese again. What's going on here? You know what it is? It's the government trying to cover it up, man.
It's what it is.
Yeah, Men in Black. They want this story out.
Yeah, Marco Charisse had a cyst under his left armpit, and he had already scheduled a surgery to remove it sometime prior. And according to Mauricio Antonio Santos, the commander of the 24th Battalion at the Varginha Military Police, the death occurred due to a strong hospital infection after the operation. And they included that information in the IPM copies of the medical report prepared by the Institute of Propedatics and Diagnosis at Varginha, one day after the death of the police officer. He wasn't involved in any occurrence with extraterrestrials, according to the military, that it was a complication due to an infection from his surgery that he passed away.
And from what I understand, they were able to provide documentation that he had this surgery scheduled before this incident was to take place, and provide medical documentation that he'd been diagnosed with this cyst that needed to be removed. And it was just an unfortunate tragedy that he passed away. But of course, ufologists are going to jump on that and say he was part of this. Did you guys see the soldier died 3 weeks ago? But on the other hand, this man's sister believes that he died as a result of handling an alien.
Yeah, and then you have the zoo deaths that happened in April. After all of this goes on, in April, on the evening of April 21st specifically, Terezinia Klepf and her husband and some friends attend a birthday party at a restaurant in Varginha Zoo. And then around 9 o'clock, she finishes eating, goes out to sit on the veranda and have a cigarette. And then she gets this feeling that someone's looking at her. And then she turns and sees a strange creature staring at her. It was only 15 feet away and appeared to be about 4 or 5 feet tall. And she wasn't sure whether it was an animal or something else. It was very ugly, though. It was brown and had a brightness or shininess to the skin. Its eyes were big and red, and its mouth was just a tiny stroke. He stayed there looking at her. She was so terrified she could barely move because it wasn't in an enclosure. She then retreated inside and got her husband, and by the time they got back out, it had left. Then, after that incident, it was publicized that the director of the zoo informed that 5 animals had mysteriously died at the zoo about a week before that experience. An anteater, 2 deer, a blue macaw, and a bobcat suddenly died unexpectedly. The macaw was found in the bobcat's throat, but we're not really sure what happened there. The deaths were all due to an unidentified toxic substance. The deer, however, died of caustic intoxication without apparent cause. So the deer was drinking something, maybe hard tequila. This is a very curious case, and like most cases, my biggest problem with it, no ashtray. There's no physical evidence. Everything here is just people talking. It's just stories. D'Souza doesn't pocket part of the ship into his pocket and walk away with it.
Right. That's exactly what I thought whenever they had that testimony. I mean, I guess it could have been easily said, well, the government showed up and made him go away or run him off, but they didn't make any indication they searched him or anything. I was thinking, man, if I saw a UFO crash, that's the first thing I would try to do, I guess. I don't know.
Correct.
But I don't know. When I look at this case, it just so mirrors so many cases in the UFO world. I mean, when you first hear the case, it's really amazing. I mean, there's aliens running around. There's a crashed flying saucer. We have someone who dies as a result of direct contact. But then when you look at it a little more carefully, here we have what really starts the story is the 3 girls having their encounter with a creature. And then after the fact, weeks after the fact, or several days after the fact, then we have the sighting. And there are other people came forward later. But this has been proven time and time again, where if my wife and I are sitting on the front porch and we see a light in the sky, we don't know what it is. We think that's weird looking, And then we read in the paper the next day and it says, man reports being abducted by aliens or something. We're going to immediately say, that weird light we saw, I bet that was that flying saucer. See what I mean? These things, that's one reason I think witnesses always come forward after the fact. Now, it could be said that they were being intimidated or whatever. I mean, we're looking at this story 26 years later. All of the pertinent facts, all of the extraordinary claims come from UFO investigators, not from one witness, not really.
Well, I mean, there are some, like D'Souza, for example. He comes forward and claims that 2 men approached him and said, you didn't see what you saw. Then the mother of the girls claims that 5 days after the event, she's approached by government officials.
No, that's true.
And said, hey, you didn't see what you saw. Here's a bag of money. Shut up about this. And she doesn't take it. And that's her claim.
So she says.
So she says. Now, if we believe these people, then there is something going on under the hood here. It doesn't necessarily mean they're aliens. It could be. But it also could be the case that there is some other thing like a important satellite from Russia downs and the U.S. wants to recover it because it has information on it or some details that will allow them to have better insights into the capabilities of the Russian
or
intelligence
could have
program.
been an American satellite
that they didn't want to fall into other people's hands. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are a lot of ways this story could go where you could make sense of what is going on without introducing aliens in any way, shape, or form, other than you have these claims that they actually saw an alien, which might turn out to be this diaper-wearing fellow who likes to play with pebbles and cigarette butts.
And if you think about the United States official stand on UFOs now, it all goes back to the Robertson panel back in the 1950s when there was hysteria over sightings over Washington, D.C. And the Robertson panel got together, it was all top secret at the time, and said we have to demystify UFOs. We have to get people to stop thinking about them and talking about it. And from that point on, the government stopped talking about UFOs. Before, in the 1940s and 50s, they were pretty open about, we don't know what these things are. We were interested in reports about UFOs and flying saucers. I mean, they were genuinely concerned. However, the United States government was concerned that communists could take advantage of UFO hysteria somehow and destabilize our government or leave us vulnerable to attack because Americans are so hysterical over flying saucers. that's when they adopted this policy of just always say no. We don't investigate UFOs. You saw something else or whatever. And to believe that maybe a couple of CIA agents showed up to tell people to stop talking about it, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, but not for the same reasons that most ufologists believe. I think it's because they want to tamp this kind of stuff down. I think they want to keep people from getting hysterical and ramping it up and believing that aliens are here. But on the other hand, too, some of the witnesses always seem to come forward years later with their stories. And I mean, there's just nothing there other than people, what they say. There's never anything there other than, yeah, man, I saw an American airplane. It was a United States Air Force plane. It landed and stayed overnight, and they loaded a box on it and left. Okay. All right. Awesome. I mean, there's never anything there.
That's right.
You can corroborate
physical proof.
Yeah.
It is all just verbal.
I mean, it's a great story, and maybe it really happened, or maybe it was a combination of things. I don't know. And one thing that always disturbs me about UFO documentaries, like the one that James Fox made, which I liked it. I liked it a lot. I mean, I bought it. I bought the Phenomena as well.
Right. As did
and I enjoy watching them.
Yep.
They're very entertaining, and I love the stories, and they roll these stories out in a very compelling way. But there is never, ever a dissenting voice. There never, ever is, do they interview someone who, I can guarantee for all of the enthusiastic ufologists in Brazil that they interviewed for this movie, there was not one skeptic interviewed that said, well, actually, we think it might be this mentally handicapped guy. He's from this area. He kind of resembles the body and everything. It was during a windy rainstorm. Now, maybe that wasn't it. But at the same time, it's like you're not given an opportunity to see an opposing point of view. I mean, even if you believe in UFOs and aliens and you believe this thing happened, I think it's worth talking about what else it could be, or what other people think it was, or what a skeptic thinks it was. It's the way it should be reported, I think.
Right. So I found a documentary on this incident where they did just that. And they had a young Nick Pope on, and he was the most rational I've ever seen him, where he constantly said, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. There are lots of reasons why this might have occurred. And he says, my experience in working with military people is that they are good people and they do a hard job, and that we should give their testimony some weight. And they are not generally inclined to lie about stuff or to overstate things, and we should consider that as a possibility. He's very rational through the whole thing and provided the dissenting viewpoint with a couple of other ufologists who were on the episode as well. It was a really good documentary, actually, and man, Nick looked really young. So it had been close to the incident.
And maybe he's decided, like a lot of other people that look into this, that being a believer pays better. You get more airtime whenever you spin out the mystery.
I think that's probably true.
You know, and a couple other points. So there were some witnesses that saw some of these boxes being delivered to the hospital in the back door. So there were several people that saw that. And of course, the assumption is these were the aliens. But according to a skeptical point of view, they said that trucks were dropping off strange mechanisms at the hospital, that they were delivering new cardiovascular equipment to the hospital. And there was an ambulance dropping off a corpse that had been exhumed as part of an ongoing criminal investigation.
There was also an expectant dwarf couple that, I'm not making this up. I'm not being funny. There was an expectant dwarf couple who were in the hospital at the time that were having a baby, and that they may have been mistaken.
They were little people.
Little people. Yeah, that's what they claim.
You know, the truth is all this information's out there. The documentation about the hospital, the documentation about the trucks being aligned, you know, all that stuff's there. And these ufologists who claim to be investigators, you know, just blow right past all that stuff. They blow right past that, hey, new cardiovascular equipment was being delivered. You know, they just want to focus on the sensationalized story that there were aliens there.
Yeah, okay, so this is another pet peeve of mine as well, and I need to bring this up. I'm going to get your feedback on it. So in the James Fox documentary, as well as in a lot of the written material that I consumed on this project, there were many people who were listed as Soldier X or Anonymous Witness A, B, C, D, E, F, G. James Fox also in his video had people on there who were anonymous, their voice was masked, they were filmed digitized or from behind, so you don't know who they are. I don't like that. I do not like people who do not go on the record and put it down that I was there, this is my name, this is my daily routine that I did on this day, this is the information I have. If you don't do that, I'm not inclined to believe you.
I always have that same problem with UFO photographs, like that one that was just released recently from the UK that supposedly was taken in the 80s or 90s.
Right, the Calvine photo.
Yeah, the photographers are anonymous, and usually that says hoax.
Yep.
It looks fantastic. I hope it's real, but probably not.
Right.
In this case, I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't know if true. Some of the people were still very concerned about the Brazilian government coming after them if they talked about this case. So let's imagine for a moment that it is true, and the Brazilian government is covering up that they covered up a crashed flying saucer and recovered alien bodies. Some of the witnesses said, we can't tell the public about this because our civilization would end and stuff like that. Brazil's not the United States. I don't know what, even in the United States, you make an oath. But on the other hand, who would believe it? Few witnesses come forward. Most people don't believe it other than people that are into UFOs and paranormal and things like that. But most serious news agencies don't take this seriously.
Yeah, I'm getting to the point where unless you could show me the alien ashtray,
yeah,
I'm not on board.
But it's an interesting case.
It is.
It's just, once again, it feels more like the facts come from the pertinent facts, the really juicy ones, like the guy grabbing the alien running across the road and then later dying of unknown diseases or toxins. You know, that stuff always comes from UFO investigators, and it never seems to have a real solid foundation. They'll just say things like credible witnesses or I've uncovered evidence. You know, but what is that evidence? Who are these credible witnesses? It's so seldom that you get all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, fun story. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the James Fox. It was a little not as good as the Phenomenon, but definitely worth watching, worth renting one night if you're into that sort of thing. It's better than most.
Oh, for sure.
These documentaries that you watch. Good. A little bit too much for me, for my taste. I prefer a straight-on documentary. Leave out some of the reality TV stuff of where you're driving around and talking about, wouldn't this be amazing if this was real? And just think about this, you know, just report the facts and interview the witnesses. Me personally, but then it would have been a much shorter documentary because
there's not a lot there.
There wasn't as much substance there as there was for the Phenomenon either. But it's a great case, and I liked it.
Yeah, and I do believe something did crash out there. What, I don't know, but something did crash, and it was related to the military. I think that's probably true. I'd give it a better than 50% chance.
I don't think anything crashed. I think we would have had a lot more witnesses.
If it crashed on the outskirts in the farm, and it wasn't like some big event, like a hell.
Well, the guy said there was a house right down they could see the house.
Mm-hmm.
A house right there. They passed several farmhouses.
Yeah, it's a farm with a white house, which may have not even been occupied. They don't say.
Okay.
You know, it's a small house, you know.
Maybe you're right. And maybe they were paid off or told not to talk. There was one witness that whenever they showed up, he threatened to shoot them if they stayed on his property. One of the... What wasn't it? The other guy with Marco Cherez?
Yeah, it was his partner.
Died, and he threatened to shoot them if they didn't get off his property.
You know, I have a relative who's like that. It's hard to say. You know, some people are just a little off-putting. You know,
Who, Brian?
No. I don't want to name names.
Just kidding, Brian.
No. Brian's incredibly personable. He would have come out and chatted up for way too long.
Yeah.
He'd been like, I think it was
hell yeah at UFOs down here.
It was down here, and it was Bigfoot. Guarantee.
Do you have anything you want to add to this one?
No. I think I'm good.
All right. Well, fantastic case. And one last thing about it is that they fully embraced this in the city of Varginha, similar to Roswell. They have a huge water tower in their city, is in the shape of a flying saucer. They have statues.
Badass.
Historical markers about, an alien was captured here. So the city's fully embraced it for tourism, no doubt, because it's a very popular case. Well, all right. I guess we're going to wrap it up here. Before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and visit our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Jimmy, did I leave anything out?
Nope, I think you got it all covered.
All right, with all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll see you next week.
I still think that it was Bigfoot in the spaceship and that they escaped. They escaped because they could blend in better. The little gray aliens, they're weak, they're oily.
They're probably oily because Bigfoot ran out of toilet paper and used them for toilet paper. And dropped them off to the side of the forest.
Think about it. You got the strong stench. Always people report Bigfoot. I mean, every encounter here had a strong stench. I'm saying Bigfoot was on board. I mean, we've got all kinds of reports of Bigfoot and UFOs. Why not?
Your logic infallible.
They may have been looking for the little chupacabra.
Where did Fido go? You need to go find him.
What's the little chupacabra?
Those military jackasses shot
Is that him? Oh, wait, pull out your too low.
Yeah, probably had the guy who was not a very good pilot, take a watch that night.
Yeah, maybe. All right, man, let's get out of here.
All right.
All right.
Bye. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders, news, and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.